As it's been a staggering year in Israel for immigration. Over 70,000 people immigrated to this small country in 2022. That's more than twice as many as the year before. And yet this is the highest number in over 2 decades. That's all according to the year-end figures released by the Jewish Agency today. They manage immigration, or at least most of it. Now, the dramatic increase was directly driven by Moscow's invasion of neighboring Ukraine and its crackdown on freedoms at home. More than half of this year's immigrants coming from Russia. Just these figures, take this, are staggering. Some 37,364 people officially arrived from Russia, 14,680 from Ukraine, nearly 2,000 from Belarus. There's really no recent comparison to this type of influx of just people to this country. Now, along those lines, though, nothing simple about that process. And we're joined in the studio today by Sophia Tupolev-Luz, the founder of the Reboot Startup Nation. This is someone in the space is doing something about all this, and you've got your ear to the ground on all this, so thanks for coming back. I know we spoke about this some months ago. This was still a growing phenomenon when these numbers were starting to, the phenomenon was real, people coming in by the thousands. We've reached these staggering figures already here. First, tell us about your organization, Reboot Startup Nation, at large. What are you up to?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me back on your show and for shedding light on this important issue that really affects tens of thousands of people that are now all of our new neighbors and friends. Yeah. So the Reboot Startup Nation actually started as a response to the war in Ukraine, and we saw that people were flooding into the country, and we said, what will they do when they're here? They get their housing, they get their basic needs met. What happens on day 2? And I said, they're going to need jobs. So we said, let's get...
mostly young people?
Mostly, there's half of them are working age. Okay. And working age is anything between 18 to 55 in Israel's definition of working age.
Big range, okay.
And so many of them are skilled, and so many of them are educated, so many of them want to work in high tech. So we started connecting them with jobs in high tech.
Yeah, I think that was the nature of our discussion.
That was what we talked about last time.
This high tech avenue with so many with that background seeking that, but it's gone far beyond that at this point. I understand.
Yeah. So basically, we're working on increasing the social capital of new immigrants. That means their connections, their network, their ability to access information from other people. How are you supposed to get recommended into a new job if you don't know anybody in the country, right? Yeah. Things like that. And so as part of that, we started getting complaints from people that they weren't able to set up a bank account. They weren't able to transfer money from abroad. So we started to look into the issue. And a few months ago, we ran an initial survey in our community saying, did you have problems in Israel's banking sector? And staggering amount of people replied, honestly saying there are many challenges.
Probably not a surprise to anyone watching who has gone through this themselves, who knows that, we're not in, as I like to say, we're not in Kansas anymore when it comes to how the banks work and how the system works here. So that's emerged as a front issue, people's finances and dealing with the system here, seeking stability in their lives. I mean, this is the bottom line.
Right. They're really just trying to survive. Yeah. And, many of them come here, in the best case, they were able to sell everything, and now they need to bring money into the country. We had someone tell us that they were in Ukraine, they sold their car, they moved here, and they tried to transfer the money, and then they weren't able to do so. Similar stories of people who sell property in Russia because of political oppression. They're unable to bring their money to Israel because, what's changed? The word sanctions. And the banks don't have the tools to properly serve their customers, despite their desire to do so. Because, of course, Israel and the banks, they would love for immigrants to come, bring their capital, come here.
Sounds like a win-win-win.
It sounds like a win-win, right?
But it's not that simple.
It's not that simple.
What can be done about it? I mean, we're talking about the banking system at large. This is it's a diverse beast across the country here. This isn't just one entity necessarily. What kind of action? What can be taken here? I know you have a bit of a call to action here in terms of making moves on this. Yeah. What's the next step?
So really, I look at this as a communication breakdown because Israel wants the immigrants, the banks want their money, and the immigrants want to put their money in the banks. So what's wrong, right? So we're doing another survey actually, and hundreds of people have already responded. I'm producing a report, and I'm going to personally bring it to the banking regulator of the state of Israel. Wow. So people who answer my survey will have an opportunity to have their individual problems reported directly to the top. And we hope that in dialogue with people in the system, we'll be able to show them the information they need so that they will create clear guidelines, clear communication about this issue to the people that work in the banks and to the people that are trying to bring their money into the banks.
Oh, hats off to you. This is a lofty goal, but it's so important to now not just these tens of thousands of new people, so many before them as well. I mean, just in the last years, any new immigrant, one of the things that, I know is a glaring issue and that involves everything is the language. I mean, Hebrew, trying to adapt into the local scene without coming in with that language. And that, I assume that translates into the banking issue as well to a large degree, the access or lack of it in people's mother tongues, language, English in particular. How's that being tackled by so many of these new immigrants? Are they able to learn Hebrew? Do they have those resources? What happens?
Well, learning Hebrew is actually a big problem for them, but the fact that most banking interfaces are in Hebrew is a challenge. We had someone respond, one of the responses I read this morning was that someone tried to file a complaint about not being able to access banking services, but they couldn't because everything was in Hebrew, and they got rejected by the system for filing it in English.
And long-winded sort of legalese, in these banking documents. I know that well.
Yeah.
You can't possibly get into that as an immigrant. You can't decipher that. You can't put that into Google Translate.
You can't decipher that. And not every immigrant has the money to actually hire a lawyer and try to fight their case. And we're not talking about people that are coming here with tons of money. This is a separate issue affecting professionals, people like you and me that have a salary, or maybe they want to start a company, and they are people that are in the workforce. They need to bring their money, they need to deposit their salaries, maybe they want to bring their companies here. What about that, right? So the potential is really huge, and because this is a regulatory environment, I had to find partners to help me with this, and I'm working with Anna Moshe, who's a partner of Pearl Cohen, and she's an expert in international transactions, and that's the other piece of this, that we're working on actual concrete things that need to be clarified, that from knowledge of the system.
But you're boiling this down to real action points.
Real action points.
It's just a philosophical discussion about how things should be better, quote unquote.
No, so people are responding to the survey, we're gathering data, and we actually are bringing recommendations based on that data and based on the legal expertise that we have on our team now. So
I can't commend you enough on these efforts. I know they impact so many people, a record amount of people at this point here. So the Reboot Startup Nation and Sophia Tupolev-Luz, if you haven't heard about her, look her up and get involved if you need help out there watching the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.